The moderator for this panel is, full disclosure, on my board of directors. And so happy to have him back. He moderated a similar session last year, and we found that the audience, got tremendous value from it. So I'm sure that it's going to be the same this year. So I'm going to introduce Mike Binko. He is the CEO of CloudTrack, and he's going to moderate the session. I think one of our panelists might be running late, but he's on his way. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike when she goes on to the stage. Thank you.
So thanks again for sticking with us. This we consider one of the anchor tenants of this shopping mall. We thank the panelists for joining us. Keith Trippie from the Department of Homeland Security called me 10 minutes ago. He's in a cab. He'll be here about 3 or 4 minutes after we start. Perfect timing for our topic along FedRAMP. So, and their role in that regards. In putting this session together, the last couple of years, we've basically found that the interest in the availability of folks to kind of talk about cloud has obviously ticked up a little bit in the last year. A little side note from last year, we had a little challenge of kind of doing the pre-call. This year we were able to use GoToMeeting without a problem. Last year it wasn't allowed in one of the agencies that we were working with on this panel, so that added a little comic relief for us up front. But I think that just shows some of the willingness for the agencies, and through some of the guidance of NIST with Dawn and her team's participation on the reference architecture, and now moving into the use case scenarios side of where can cloud work for agencies. Those are some of the topics that we're going to hit on. We have 5 topics that we're going to hit along a number of different categories. But before I do that, I got to put out a word. Haggis. Raise your hand if you know what that word is. Wow, more people than I thought. Okay. If you do know what it is, and someone next to you didn't raise your hand, so hold on to that and don't tell them until later in the session. Just put that in your short-term memory if you would suffer me with that. The folks on the panel, we're going to ask everybody to kind of just give a little 2-minute perspective on their agency's view of cloud, initiatives that are going on, a little bit about themselves, and then we're going to jump into the 5 topics, which are their general perspectives. Primary challenges, obviously, that the agencies face, many have been brought up previously. FedRAMP, specifically with the concept operations report out recently. I'm sure everybody has been shredding that document as far as understanding, does my platform commit to the standards if I'm a vendor? If I'm an agency looking at a platform, how am I going to get it into FedRAMP certification? Procurement horizon, the priority goals that these agencies have in moving to cloud, and where that's going to be moving from a contracting and program management perspective. I think we're going to have some keen insights on that front. And if we have time at the end, we timed it out on the pre-call, and I think it was going to be about 45 minutes or 50. We're going to try and hit on what are the return on investment metrics that the agencies are hoping to address in their movement to cloud. Some of them that popped up in the conversation already and that we're seeing in survey research and feedback into SIIA are surprising. And I think Kevin and the Deltek team are kind of keeping the finger on a pulse of several of them. It's not just total cost of ownership anymore. It really does hit at a more fundamental level of ROI at a more sophisticated level with cloud. So best practice management, automation. If you need auditability or transparency, can that be done in the cloud? And if so, how? CloudTrack, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we basically deliver governance, risk, and compliant data and process management in the cloud. And here's Keith Trippie. Thanks for joining us.
Just in time speaking.
At CloudGov, we chose to announce 3 new things with the company today, so I won't go into much depth on it, but what we've announced is version 8 of our platform, which adds considerable support for usability, the governance, risk, and compliance. We've also added an iCloud capability with a K for our cloud related to mobile device support, including the Apple iPad. So a lot of agencies have been asking for that, procuring mobile devices more and more, and you want to make sure that your cloud environment can handle some of the security challenges there. The other element that we're creating is more of a services and solutions approach that we're calling FedRAMP road mapping. We've gone through the activities ourselves. We're personally, as a company, involved in the reference architecture as co-chairs and on the use case scenario side. And we believe that the The ConOps has been a really well thought out document, combination of NIST's effort and the working groups, as well as GSA, OMB, and the input from the CIO Council as well. So we're excited about that, and feel free to contact us after the event for more information. So with that, we'll kind of jump into the general perspectives on cloud for each agency. And I'd ask Adrian if he could take this one first and give us some perspectives. That'd be great.
So great. Very, very quickly, so just wanted to give you a footprint of NASA. We're 10 centers strong, 7 facilities, around 19,000 federal employees, and then 30,000 contractors. And if you look at the vision, you know, my short sort of synopsis of the vision is we make the impossible possible. That is a true statement. Every day, we live and breathe with scientists and engineers that are really trying to answer the hard questions, the tough questions that this country, this world has to answer as far as looking at climate, looking at the aspects of what's out there in space, and then how do we understand our role in sort of this cosmic environment in which we live in. And so not recognizing beyond the fact that Earth is not the only entity in the solar system, and making sure that we understand that. As that applies to cloud, NASA is one of the most innovative agencies in the country, period. That's what we do day in and day out. And so cloud is also one of those opportunities that we've taken upon ourselves to invest in. So I'm assuming that a number of you know what we've been doing with Nebula, and now the OpenStack opportunity in collaboration with Rackspace. That is the kind of stuff that we actually do day in and day out on the mission side. We're now just sort of making investments on that within the CIO community. As it applies to cloud, we're looking at, so you know, when we initially thought about Nebula, we really thought about the scientists and engineers. So we really were looking more towards a private cloud. And one of the things that we're beginning to have some discussions with Keith and others is that now it's going to take a number of clouds, or a series of clouds, no pun intended, in order to meet the needs of NASA. And so instead of the either-or proposition between public or private, why do I have to choose? Why isn't there an opportunity where I could actually receive that service through a cloud broker, or in my words, in a larger scale, a service broker? Because I really want to get to the point of looking at compute across the spectrum. In other words, all the way from the desktop up to supercomputing, with cloud playing a role in that spectrum of compute. So I don't see it as much as a competition between supercomputing and cloud and virtualized data center and hardened data center, all the way down to the desktop where we're talking about virtual desktop infrastructure, so on and so forth. I think there are opportunities where we should look at it as cloud being part of that tool basket that now scientists, engineers, and in general, folks have the opportunity to leverage. And so that's what I would say, starting out the box, as a very quick opening statement.
Great. So thank you, Adrian. And with that, we know from talking with some folks on your OCIO Directorate that big data is a topic that you'll be weighing in on a little bit later, as well as Lorraine on the Veteran Affairs. So Lorraine, would you introduce the main perspectives that you guys have for cloud?
Sure, happy to. So cloud for us is a really, really important future for how we want to conduct business. The Department of Veterans Affairs is the largest civilian agency in government. The last time I tried to do something with the GAL, we had over 330,000 employees in there. Giant hospital system, 57 regional benefits offices, as well as headquarter functions, and the National Cemetery Administration. So huge mission, huge number of employees, lots of different types of systems, and with the people returning back from Iraq, and with sort of the drawdown of the military, more customers coming at us than we really know what to do with. So we really see cloud as a way of extending our capabilities. In terms of our position on cloud, we're obviously, or maybe not obviously, but with the Federal Data Center Consolidation Initiative, we see ourselves really being out of the data center business by 2018. So that means that we've got to figure out who's going to host us and how we do that and how we move in that direction. in terms of infrastructure as a service, there's probably nothing off the table. One of the partners outside, right outside the door there, Terramark, right now they're our largest sort of cloud hosting provider. We've paid over $15 billion in education benefits through the systems that are hosted there. We've also got some service offerings where when Agent Orange was introduced as a presumptive classification, there was an initiative called Fast Track where I didn't need to build the system to create the solution. I just needed the data coming out of it to let me know who was qualified and who wasn't. And so we had the entire solution hosted for us in the cloud very quickly. So anyhow.
Great. And obviously,
that's enough of an overview.
And obviously liaising with the veterans that are coming off of active duty, working with the Armed Forces services that they're coming out of, particularly for maybe health records management, data portability becomes a real challenge in that environment. Keith, you want to hit next with Homeland Security? We're going to Keith is going to kind of take the point position when we hit the FedRAMP topic, so maybe save that one for later, but some other initiatives that you might be consuming cloud with.
Yeah, so Ed, we, much like the folks down there, it's way too much of me, I think, right now. Let's lower that. Just like much of the efforts that Adrian and Lorraine are doing, and the other folks that are up here, we are knee-deep in cloud. I think it's unfortunately a very overused word. The word I like to say is we're buying commodity IT. I think as the CIOs mature and let's not be looked at as the IT people. Let's not be looked at as the folks that just do BlackBerries and desktops. We're mission enablers. We are part of the chief strategic direction that missions are going in. We're partners with our different leadership groups on the mission and business lines. And so the value proposition that we have to look at is, if we're in the data center business, then I think we're in the brick and mortar business, then let's put on a hard hat and go do hard hat work. I don't know if that's really where we need to go in the future. I think probably the better value that we would provide is we're providing computing capability that spans the different business services that we need to go execute our mission. And so as we talked about a little bit earlier here, we are in the department moving very aggressively into right now what we call private cloud and public cloud. In the public cloud, we partnered with GSA to enable, leverage the GSA BPA for infrastructure as a service. We'll be sweeping the deck with all the public-facing websites of the department and putting that out there in the public cloud. We've partnered with our friends over at CIS and enabled a capability that we call self-check. It allows U.S. workers to go in and check to see if they're eligible to work in the United States. We just did a nationwide rollout with our friends at CIS. Very excited about that. We put out a service, it's called Identity Proofing in the Cloud. It's used a lot in the financial services, not used a lot over in our federal space. We have a service that's available that could be reused tomorrow by other federal agencies if we didn't have the break in the supply chain. We have a significant acquisition challenge ahead with us for us to be able to leverage cloud services and share. Why can't I use some of what Lorraine's doing down there over at Veterans? Why can't they use some of what we're doing over here? How come we can't order in a day? Those are things that I'll probably talk about a little later, so that's kind of what we're doing in our public cloud. In our private cloud, we've enabled 30,000 users that are consuming collaboration capabilities across the department. We have an authentication service where 88 different applications across the department are consuming that. So that means what happened? They didn't have to go build their own authentication service. We're providing a shared service for that need. We're also rolling out messaging as a service as we speak. We've got some other efforts around development, test, and infrastructure as a service. You're going to go from the old world to the new world, and I'm a big proponent of the new world, and I do not like the old world. I just spent a 25-minute cab ride out in the rain in the middle of rush hour. That is the old way of doing IT. The new way of doing IT is what we did here. I just walked in, just-in-time speaking. We want just-in-time IT. And so what we're trying to do is to say, going from our old model to the new model, let's provide a glide path for our customers to get from the old world to the new. So put it in the development world, lots of flexibility to be able to go out and create new capabilities, move it over to test, glide path over the wall into production. You know what? Everybody that's in this room that is looking to sell to the government, we all have that same problem, right? Huge opportunities for small businesses to take it, to go out and look at that market space and say, how do I help federal agencies get from A to B? They don't have to be in the air conditioning and server business. They can provide value to us by saying, here's a good, repeatable methodology to get from the old world to the new world. So we've got a lot cooking across this space, as the folks do up here. What I hope we can collaborate together on is, how do we, marshal the federal, the power of the federal government, and then change the business model to where I want to be able to put $20 million on a contract tomorrow, and I want to move it from my organization legitimately to a vehicle. I'm sure you guys would as well. And then once that happens, I have a fully catalog of services. Adrian talked about that earlier. Why can't we get that? Why can't we move to that model? And I think collectively the feds are starting to have that conversation about how we can shift that business paradigm to the new world. And with that, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about how we do that.
Sounds good. Thank you, Keith. And that touches on the topic that we on the vendor side probably would call legacy to cloud migration, or the interoperability of systems, and we'll touch on that in a little more detail. John Edgar with United States Postal Service. A little bit of a different perspective that you guys have. Obviously, your constituents are the same citizens of the country, and you're involved from delivering probably more so with a broad base of stakeholders from an employee base. So we talked in the pre-call of some of the cultural shifts that might need to occur within the agencies.
Yeah, I think the old to new point is really applies very well with the Postal Service. We deliver 165 billion pieces of mail a year across the United States. And when you think about that, it's not just the physical pieces of mail. The amount of data that's associated with each one of those mail pieces is tremendous. So as we touch on things like big data and application modernization and some of the things that have been touched on today, it applies tremendously to an organization that from an infrastructure standpoint, a technology infrastructure, touches 32,000 postal facilities across the country. We operate our 2 data centers, so we are brick and mortar in that sense, but we've spent the last 10 years consolidating our data centers to where we're down to those 2. Now, given what you've all seen, I'm sure in the newspapers and the financial state of the Postal Service, we're not in a position to grow those data centers. We're closing plants. We're consolidating post offices and looking to optimize the level of service that we provide across the country and do it much more cost effectively. From a technology side, we need to drive the same thing with the technology that we provide. We're not going to be going to build a 3rd data center. We're following the same principles that the rest of the federal government is, and looking to take advantage of cloud services and cloud capabilities that can help drive down the cost, but at the same time improve the level of service that we can provide to our constituents all across the United States and across the world. It's an international business. So, as we're looking at cloud areas, we are targeting today and have targeted niche areas that we can start to take advantage of and help improve the capabilities that we do have. Certain places that we've already started doing this are in our procurement area. Our internal electronic purchasing system is a software as a service that we have had in place now for about 3 years. So we've got that on one end. On the other end, we've got various custom-built applications that are being cloud hosted in infrastructure as a service functions. Things like where external major mailers can call into this service or send a message to this service and have return labels generated for people that are trying to return products, don't have the labels to make it happen. So it's kind of everything in between, and that's kind of where we are today. But as we do go forward, we definitely are looking to grow that cloud capability, look to bring in some of the new functionalities, tie into with FedRAMP, so that we can do it in a secure manner. We're legally mandated to be SOX compliant. We do a lot of credit card payments, so we need to be PCI compliant, as well as complying with all the various privacy and PII protections that everyone else in the government has to do. So when you put all that together, it's a rather stringent regulatory environment that we must comply with. So as we move into externally hosted solutions, we need to make sure that those will integrate with that as well.
And thank you, John. And I would also say that in your environment, there's also commercial competitive situations that
Absolutely.
don't necessarily, aren't your drivers necessarily behind decisions from a procurement side or where you might go, but operationally, cost containment, best practice management, and taking a nod from commercial and being competitive is important.
Absolutely. When you think about protection of privacy data, personally identifiable information, federal government has its standards and regulations around what that is defined as. There are protections we have to have. When we start dealing with commercial mailers that are exchanging data with the Postal Service, they may not have the same definition. So we have a lot of challenges, let's say, ensuring that the data is captured and protected and managed correctly from a non-government environment into the Postal Service. We provide it as the right protections, and then be able to make sure that all the return information around that can be properly distributed and protected back to those commercial companies as well.
Thank you, Dan. And Stefan Leeb, we're very fortunate to have NOAA represented here, really hot off the presses with one of the more recent application stack sides of a cloud deployment recently with the Google Apps environment. So Stefan, as a program lead for that, is going to give us some perspective as we go through. Could you give us a little bit more of maybe a top-level view of other areas that NOAA is looking at?
I'm sure. First of all, on the Google Apps for Government, I spent the last year delivering that for NOAA. That's 25,000 accounts for all of our users across the country, international territories, and throughout the country. And I'm happy to say we completed that transition in December. And if anyone is interested in our lessons learned, I've got quite a lot to talk about, and I'm happy to share our pain. So I'm happy to talk about that afterwards. Anyway, NOAA is very committed to cloud first, which of course means consider cloud in any new procurement. And we're pursuing multiple avenues to utilize that wherever practical, including data center consolidations, which is really big right now, as well as cloud-hosted infrastructure and applications. For data centers, we have a new ground rule. Stop digging. Put down the shovel. Do something different. And when you do that, you have to operate with new constraints. And that is to either use the capacity that you have or go to the cloud. And so that's what we're doing. And because of this, we're not putting in new data centers to a new facility. So we have 2 new facilities coming online very soon, and neither of them are going to have data centers. So that's kind of new for us. So for existing data centers, we're looking at the services they provide and figuring out what do they do, are they readily available in the cloud, and if so, why not put them in the cloud? So for hosting applications internally, we're asking ourselves, why are we doing this? Time to go to the new way of doing things. Out with the old. When the data center lease renewals come up, we do the same thing. We figure out what services are being hosted in this facility. Are these services able to be brought to the cloud? And if so, we don't have to renew the lease. Imagine that, save money. So we're looking at other ways to leverage the cloud to provide access to we provide access to NOAA data to all of our users anywhere on any device, and we have a few SaaS pilots going, especially in the area of geographic information systems. But the bottom line is that NOAA is very committed to using cloud services, and in a time of shrinking budgets, it's kind of a no-brainer. And we talked about Google. That's kind of like the gateway drug to cloud services. So it's a great way to start using the cloud. It's very, very simple. So it's a no-brainer, and you should consider using cloud alternatives regardless of what 1B says.
Great.
Fortunately, they say the same thing.
They say the same thing. It's easy.
Thank you, Stefan. So our second generic topic that we wanted to kind of focus on, our primary topic, is challenges for the agencies as they look to field the cloud initiatives. I know with Dawn's presentation and the working groups within NIST, that's point of the spear is a lot of the effort is focusing on that. From the early efforts of definition of cloud to definition of a cloud broker to a reference architecture and the documents that were released in November. There's been a lot of heavy lifting, not only by NIST, but inviting the agencies to get involved through the CIO Council and their directorates, but also industry has been actively invited to participate. So if you have not, and you're in this room, you have an interest in cloud either as a vendor or consumer, get involved with the use case scenarios or the reference architecture or the working groups that are available to you. They're seeking your input. We've hit some of these topics, the legacy migration and typo on bridging the old to the new, infrastructure and applications. That's a topic that we're seeing a lot of questions bubbling up. Is it still data center consolidation as the first shoe to drop that we should be focusing on? I think we've heard that there's some success stories there. I think some folks are also looking at it and saying, I don't necessarily need to or should I be looking at data center consolidation if my bigger shoe to drop is on the applications and operations and mission critical side. So I think that's where we're starting to see, and with Stefan's example of Google Apps, that was a right direction to go in the last year for that agency. May not be the case for others, like we had Henry from DISA last year. They're focused on safe sharing. Security is an absolute critical need for them. Secure collaboration. They're not necessarily going to be going to get that in a publicly available cloud environment. So it may start as completely private and maybe moving into federated or community. So thoughts along the lines of big data, data portability. I think that was one that everybody can really, head nod and say that's one that we're going to deal with. I think for the folks that handle big data types, NASA and NOAA, that's clear. You guys have research data, sensor data that is not your typical spreadsheet or Word file or PDF. For the others, I think it's more of the volume of sharing that's going to happen. The data portability between stakeholders is really something that we'd love to wrangle with.
Yeah,
So-
and I guess not only from a standpoint of looking at sort of internal stakeholders, but the other thing is sort of how do we support decision making using our data, right? I mean, so how do we make it available? How do we get it there in a timely way? I mean, that's, when I was at Weather Service, their whole mission is really saying, how do I get the data there in time for folks to make an informed decision? And so one of the challenges we have in general, I think, across government with big data in general, is that how do we now begin to serve that up in such a way that folks can gain access to it? Most of us look for storage solutions, hardened storage solutions, and I'm saying, one of the things that we're moving towards is sort of this storage as a service and moving that to the cloud and saying now, instead of catching your refresh cycle and actually buying more hardware, let's buy more cycles in the cloud to then create that storage of openly available data that's out there anyway, but hard to find. And so I think the whole issue of big data is going to continue to impact us. And we're only talking about structured data right now. Think about unstructured data. I mean, unstructured data is going to really be where it's at. Right now, we're not managing that. We're sort of just, it's there. We know it happens. Everybody creates it. So every time you take a picture of your family and upload it to Flickr, or you take a video and send it over to YouTube, that becomes unstructured data that's available for others to use. And so how do we now, within a government perspective, begin to leverage both the structured and unstructured data and then make that available? So I think there are going to be continued challenges, but I think cloud is definitely one of those things that makes it possible. The other thing on the legacy applications is I think, we've got it, not everything is ready for the cloud. And I think a lot of people are paying attention to getting to cloud or just what can I get into the cloud. I think, my advice to folks who provide services and are looking for contracts is really saying there's a great opportunity from the standpoint of the hard work that it takes to get an application, a legacy application, from bare metal, potentially into a virtualized environment, and then to the cloud. And somebody that actually could begin to build some kind of business practice around that, huge opportunity for you. Because none of us are really, we're sort of wrangling with it, but we sort of do this, right? We're kind of going, yeah, that may be too hard, right? But I think that we've got to you guys have got to come out and sort of help us to begin to think about how we can do that in a clean and agile way and get that into the cloud, because that should be the end state. But if we don't do that hard work on the front end, we're not going to get there. We'll build the environment will be there for them, but the adoption may be low.
With skipping down to the cultural shift, I know, John, that was something in the pre-call that you were really sensitive to with your community of stakeholders, both internal and external. Could you hit on that real quick, and then Lorraine, I'm going to come to you on open source, and then Henry, we're going to hit Keith, we're going to hit topic 3 on FedRAMP with you kind of taking the lead on that.
Sure. I think looking, the way the Postal Service traditionally has operated within IT, it's been very much an internal, we have to do it ourselves model. Technology has evolved fast enough and continues to evolve faster and faster to the point where that isn't an achievable model any longer. We need to be in a position where we're taking advantage of what the best of industry can bring, using that to increase the speed to market of the solutions that we need to provide and those capabilities, and use that also to break down some of the internal cultures that we do have. It's a very unionized environment, so there's a lot of challenges there that we're continuing to evolve through. But I think one example of how we're trying to change that is traditionally, even things like disaster recovery have been totally done as an internal solution. Between our 2 data centers, our model today is they both basically point at each other and replicate the appropriate capabilities in the opposite center so that if there was an issue in one, we can recover to the other center. That's not cost effective any longer. I think one of the things I've got my organization looking at now is trying to modernize the applications, get them to a software stack and a hardware stack so that we could take those and at some point, maybe in the next 2 years, start looking at can we lift essentially all that disaster recovery capability and put that out in the cloud and do it in a way where it's more cost effective. The infrastructure that's in place will be minimal. You know, you don't have to have iron on the floor sitting there doing nothing, waiting for a disaster to happen. Yeah. So, you know, when you then, when I was speaking earlier about security and privacy, it's a big change in mindset for the organization to say, how would you do that if you have to take basically a copy of all your data and your systems and put it out in the cloud somewhere? But that's part of the culture change that we're trying to work through and enable that and try to drive down our costs.
Right. And I think that, you know, tying into some of the data and analytics that Kevin and the folks at Deltek have discovered is that, you know, disaster recovery, business continuity in the commercial sector, that's where we're seeing probably one of the first areas that our customers in financial services and healthcare and pharma and life sciences are looking to us. It's risk mitigation to them and best practice management from a technical and architecture perspective. Lorraine, that opens the topic of standards. You mentioned open source on the pre-call. I would imagine because of the broad community that you guys serve at Veterans Affairs, those standards are absolutely critical, and some of the elements of FedRAMP that we're going to get into soon and some of the other standards that are being implemented and existing under FSMA and others are critical, I'm sure.
Sure, I'm happy to take that. And the thing I forgot to mention on the call yesterday, and probably should have, is the Veterans Lifetime Electronic Records program, which is also related and somewhat integral to this. If you look at our legacy applications, they're probably no different than anybody else's. Definitely optimized and designed around the end user of the system who's interacting with the application. What VLR, Veterans Lifetime Electronic Record, is really looking at is taking more of a veteran-centric approach. It's not, you know, are they showing up as a benefits customer, or are they showing up as a for healthcare? Or are they showing up for mental health services? Or are they showing up for burial services? Or are they claiming education benefits for a family member? It's really, you know, just like everyone else, I'm sure, you know, these things evolved over time, and that's what we're dealing with now. So we have a dedicated program looking at how we bridge those gaps. So that's an enabler of getting us to this, because I forget which one of you said it. I kind of came in the middle. I think it was you. That, I mean, like you said as well, the technology is not the hard part. You know, once you give us that use case, we can figure that out. I mean, we're good at that. We had a lot of years of experience in this room doing that. It's getting the businesses to recognize that, you know, their interdependence. Now, we probably do have an advantage at the VA over most departments in that in 2007, all of the IT shops and the administrations were collapsed and consolidated. So at the department level, it's like we're not just a policy shop. We don't just service headquarters. So I'm the deputy CIO for product development. So I'm responsible for the development of all the enterprise products for healthcare, memorial affairs, benefits, corporate. It's it's one-stop shopping, which gives us that perspective. So you don't have to get TSA to share with ICE, to share with Secret Service, and so on. Not that that's not all going swimmingly since I left, I'm sure.
Actually, oddly enough, it's all solved. I don't know. Trouble before, good now. I don't know.
Got it. I understand the problem. So the other big enabler of this is when we started working with the DoD, again, on an integrated electronic health record, the Secretary signed an agreement last spring saying, you know what, we're all, again, there's no spontaneous veterans. We're all dealing with the same population of people we're serving. DoD was looking to replace Alta. We needed a more cost-effective way of modernizing Vista, and so, the planets all aligned. And so there's an interagency program office between the two departments. How are you going to take two of the biggest healthcare electronic record systems in the country and get them to work together? It's beyond just the VLR piece. It's beyond just the data sharing piece. How do you open that up? And so on August 30th, 2011, we stood up the open source electronic health record. I forget what the A stands for. Administration, Association. Anyhow, they're our custodial agent for open source electronic health record. And so VA and DoD have made the first contributions. Indian Health Service and other people are starting to contribute to that. probably our biggest strategic from an application point of view, how I'm hoping we turn the corner on real rapid application delivery. I don't want it to be a mystery on how to do business with the VA. I don't want to be in the VISTA business forever. It would be nice for me if everybody understood exactly how our software worked, exactly how it operated, so that when you come in, or when I put out an RFP or an RFI for, I don't know, let's say a new scheduling package, something that we've not had a lot of success with in the past, that it's real clear that, hey, here's how all of the data moves around in the system. So all you've got to do is contribute your adapter to get, to interface with the open source version of the electronic health record. And, my integration risk is gone, or much smaller than it is today. And from a service provider, not only can you sell to me, you can probably sell to DOD and Indian Health Service and the state of West Virginia and other people that are using this stuff. It becomes this win-win situation. So, I probably should be talking more about the stuff that the ops guys do, but that's not my responsibility. And it's probably getting well covered, and and that, like you said, with voice as a service, and look, with Terramark and DISA and everywhere else, we're on a happy glide path there. But selfishly speaking, it's looking at things like open source that I think are really going to enable solution providers to really show us up front what their value is. And again, so then I can just strike the check and know it's going to work.
Well, I think that's a great segue into FedRAMP and the certification side. And also, I'm hearing what we're hearing on the commercial side, that folks are asking for us as a vendor to be aware that to them, cloud is an ecosystem. They're not going to get everything they need in the cloud from CloudTrack. We realize that. We understand that. They're also not going to get everything they need from IBM or other big established players, much as IBM doesn't want to hear that, but it's true. And I think that ecosystem-ready aspect of cloud is something that we as vendors and the consumers and decision makers, whether it is in a public sector or in a commercial environment, need to work together on solving the challenges that are in front. And I think the FedRAMP initiative for the public sector side, that's going to spill over also into state and local and municipal. It's covering a lot of communities and stakeholders and data. So Keith, could you hit, obviously with DHS's identified role under the ConOps report, there's going to be, you guys are going to be consumers of cloud, which we've talked about, but you also will have an active role in kind of the security elements of FedRAMP.
So getting into the FedRAMP concept, the main concept here that I look at, and as a taxpayer, standardization, right? We've got budget shrinking, standardization, we talked about it down here. We talk open source, open architecture, those sorts of standards that we're looking to drive. There's no reason that we can't share data easier. I can pick up the phone and call Lorraine, but God forbid I try to share data via system, right, with Lorraine, other than say, some sort of messaging capability. So driving standardization on the operations side, I think we're talking about. The security side of this is a whole other interesting discussion. So I'll just start within DHS, then I'll broaden it out to the federal space. Within our organization, certainly Lorraine's old group over there, they did trade, they did law enforcement, they did intel, they did the budget, they did all of these different types of data sets, and all of those different sets of data either came with different regulations, different legislation that's associated with that, and that's just within her old group. You go over to two other components that are governed by SSI data. If I were to read system sensitive security information, that's kind of defined one way under the Code of Fed Regs. Yet we have two major components that have completely different interpretations about how you secure the data in those systems to do that. That's just within our organization. When you expand out further, how one group may handle health data may be different than how another group handles health data. So what's so exciting about the FedRAMP opportunity is an opportunity for the federal government to say, okay, we now have a floor, right? So before it was wild, wild west. And so now we're saying with the FedRAMP standard is, can we at least say up through moderate? We are defining what moderate means across the federal government, which to me, if I'm a vendor and I'm sitting in your shoes, I'm saying, finally, right? Thank you for the opportunity to know which target I am now shooting at. It's not moving so fast anymore. I know that if I provide a capability and I get it stigged, if you will, at FedRAMP, and I get it cleared through the wickets, I know that I'm open for business. I can hang the shingle on the door that says, I've got an acquisition vehicle for feds to get to me. I've got a good operational capability with some good SLA. I've been, certified at a threshold up to moderate, moderate, moderate. So to me, if I'm a vendor, I'm saying that's good work, right? Finally, the feds are extending out and saying we'll standardize. What we're doing right now along the ConOps effort is ourselves and GSA are aggressively looking at how we're doing this internally, right, in our own versions of test cases. And so that'll be ongoing at least through, say, the June, July timeframe, where we could look at an initial operating capability that I think the vendor community will be, kind of looking forward to seeing what we're going to be talking about and sharing at that time. We are looking at kind of taking the first pill internally, if you will, ourselves. We've got 2 primary data centers within the department. We are offering our private cloud services at, at a minimum, moderate, 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 in some cases high, high, moderate, and other flavors, out of the box. We're going to go through, and each one of the FedRAMP standards that are in place, we're going to make sure each one of our controls, at a minimum, are meeting the FedRAMP standard, and where they're not, we'll nudge them up a bit to get them up to that moderate standard. So we believe that we should be part of the leading edge of making sure that, our internal house is meeting that FedRAMP standard.
So that's by example from that perspective as in these nascent stages of it.
Right.
Also from the use case scenario side, I mean, with Dawn and the NIST efforts in the use case scenario sides, being an ombudsman organization, so to speak, between industry and agencies, I think that, there's kind of an open call of give us your challenges that you're looking at cloud for. And, just kind of ask some of the other folks, maybe Adrian, are there, we've talked to Dr. Gowan in your directorate that there are some of those pockets of research data that could very easily be, collaborated along with your commercial sector or academia and some of the other folks on the core research and lab side. So, maybe just a quick question, are there other use cases that you guys have identified, or over the next 6 months, are they part of the 3 that you're looking at to have by the end of 2012?
I mean, definitely. So you're looking at, we're looking at the storage cloud as one, storage as a service. I would actually like to, almost sort of mirror what Keith just said around, we really should be thinking about security as a service. Out of the box, the customer should get security at a baseline level, and they shouldn't have to worry about it. It should be taken care of in the back, just completely transparent to them. All they need to do is get working, right? And so I think if we can do that for them, it also puts security in a very different light. So I think security as a service has to be another one. We've also talked about sort of the virtual desktop infrastructure. So we're trying to get to bring your own device to work, right? So that's going to be huge for me because I have a huge foreign population that actually comes to the center. Transient scientists come in and out. It may take me 6 to 7 weeks, and they may only be there for 2 months to get them cleared to gain access to a NASA resource, just sheerly because they're a foreign national. If I could get to a point where I was actually securing everything at the application level, where it's a virtual desktop image that I could check in and out, and I could have a standard desktop image for the foreign nationals to come in and visiting scientists, or the scientists we currently collaborate with now in Japan to create capabilities, that's huge for me. Huge for the scientific community because now they actually gain access and have the ability to get in and really start working right off the bat, right? And that's great from a standpoint of delivery of our capabilities. So I think those are a couple that I would mention.
And on the security side, just real quick, why can't I provide that service to you? We're
Absolutely.
rolling that out this summer, partnering with Lorraine's old group.
Absolutely.
And as we roll that out, we're going to be doing it for 200,000 folks.
Absolutely.
What's the difference between me delivering a plate of glass to get services, either my services or your own services,
Absolutely.
or God forbid we share, right?
Yes.
Why can't we do that? And again, I'll go back to, we're willing to do it on the business side, right? We're working through the security. I think the last sort of barrier to entry is going to be the acquisition model, right? That allows us to truly be able to consume services. Why shouldn't you be able to use what we build, and vice versa? I'm using that big data action.
Right, and we've had a lot of discussions about that, as you know. I mean, so I think, I think the previous speaker said we're sort of followers versus leaders as far as the feds. I somewhat take offense to that, just because I would say we're sort of leading. If you look at the CIO community, we're sort of transforming ourselves. We're now becoming sort of the business strategist for the organization on how compute and storage is delivered. And so again, with these opportunities that Keith is talking about, if we can get together as a community, government-wide, and begin to think about, here are the set of requirements that we need industry to respond to provide this capability. Doesn't matter if DHS is in the lead, GSA, I don't care. I'd like to actually procure it, right? And I completely agree we've got to begin to collaborate. And then, I mean, it's even more important even within the same space, right? Because, I mean, it may be more difficult for me to collaborate with the intelligence community, but it's definitely not difficult for me to collaborate with NOAA, USGS, and EPA, and for us to kind of get our requirements together and say, this is what we want, right? And DHS is at a higher level, and we say, because DHS is doing it, it automatically fits into our sort of bailiwick. Right?
Absolutely.
And I think from a weighing in from the vendor perspective, and on the last topic, the vendor engagement, I think Stefan, with your recent deployment of Google Apps, obviously there's a timetable that rolls out now for you working with your vendor like Google and others to get onto a schedule for FedRAMP road mapping. And then perhaps, to the point that Adrian was making, once you guys get into that process, sharing it through the use case scenarios through NIST, sharing it through the CIO Council, I'm sure, as you're going to be doing, that best practice management, and okay, by the way, here's some hurdles that we faced when we became a sponsor for this vendor. We've solved those problems, but here's some other ones that bubbled up that didn't allow us to get to that higher level of certification, and you can work on it collaboratively. The next topic that we wanted to touch on is obviously of interest to just about everybody in the room, whether you're a badge-carrying person in a directorate with a CIO giving you some guidance, or a vendor looking to play in the cloud space with agencies. Procurement horizon. What are the priority goals? One question that we've kind of seen through our peers bubble up in our channel is, there's existing contracts that are out there where task orders and areas have been identified that don't say it can't be cloud, but don't say it has to be. So if it says something like best practice management or secure collaboration, and it can be delivered in a cloud environment, could that be a good use case scenario to maybe go for FedRAMP certification and help the peers go down that road? So just kind of a broad question is, are you guys looking internally at existing procurements and contract vehicles that are already in play, don't need any of the hurdles to be surmounted on procurement side, to bring cloud into existing environments?
Just real quick on that. So inside the department, absolutely we are. I think what we're seeing is there aren't a whole lot of opportunities for that model. Now that said, there are some of us that are working with GSA at a larger level to look across the USG space and say, what are those options out there? What are the contracts that are out there that we could take advantage of in the near term? And then wherever those gaps are that shake out from that, can we look at another approach, maybe a larger sort of USG strategy that we all could benefit from, and so could small and large business here. So we're looking internally as well as across the USG space.
Yeah, I guess the other thing that we've talked about is sort of, is the GWAC the right model? I mean, I've begun to have discussions with Mary Davy about, is that the right model? Given where we are now, if cloud really has the impact that we think it's going to have from a standpoint of the way in which we deliver compute and storage from a business perspective, is that the right vehicle? So I think we need to start to think about, how is the business architecture changed in the way in which government delivers compute and storage? And then what are the vehicles that we would use, the types of vehicles that we'd use to gain access to that? I mean, when Keith is saying he wants to dump some money in a big bucket and then draw it down, that's not necessarily a GWAC model. It may be, but we got to make it agile enough to make that happen. And so the other thing is that one of the things that Stefan and I were talking about was the time to delivery even of award, right? We need award like 2 to 3 months, not 2 years, right? Because the technology and the business model might have already changed 6 times by the time we get to the award. So the requirement that I wrote back here is no longer relevant. And so how do I now begin to put in place vehicles that allow for the change that we all know is going to happen across this space? If you look at cloud brokers, 6 months ago, 1, maybe 2. Today, 4, maybe 5, right? Tomorrow, 10, maybe 15. And so the question then becomes, how do we then get the best of what industry has to offer throughout the life of sort of the procurement? And so that's huge for us.
Right. Let's keep the ROI metrics topic for kind of our last one to wrangle on, just being sensitive to time here. But just real quick, if folks could say, if you could give us a snapshot of, maybe how many or if you have any significant cloud procurements that your teams are working on now, or you're working with GSA and others to get into a vehicle. Keith?
So I think within DHS, we've got our 2 primary data center contracts that we're consolidating into. Those run through 2015, right? So we're starting to look out over the horizon and say, what do we do in the longer term? And part of the questioning is, are we in the data center business or are we in the computing capability business, as we've all kind of talked about? So there's a couple things. We're looking internally at what our best options are, but at a broader scale, there's a few of us up here that are getting together with GSA and NOAA and having those discussions about what is that over the horizon target? Is there a cloud broker GWAC? Is there some sort of thing that does not exist today in the federal government that we could all leverage that allows us to order in today and maximize our buying power? Wouldn't it be sweet if all 500,000 of our employees were leveraging a common service? I'm willing to bet we get a really good price model, right, that compared to what we get today. Imagine if some of that were open source, or we're only buying by the drink. How much of that stuff software is sitting on y'all shelves that isn't being used? We're not at 100% either, right? So over the horizon, I think it's going to be a USG effort where we collaborate on leveraging existing contracts that are out there the best we can. Where there's a gap, potentially look at a GWAC-ish cloud broker sort of thing that works for all of us to be able to order in a day and get a full e-catalog of services and just provision services the next day.
And with the virtualization of the infrastructure as well as the app stack, that's more possible now than it ever has been.
I'm talking all the way up through HR, financials, big data, whatever. Don't just stop at infrastructure. Let's jump 5 generations.
Okay. John, what's USPS looking at?
I think right now, procurement-wise, we have contracts in place that provide the flexibility for us to look at on a case-by-case basis cloud solutions versus internally constructed solutions. Where we will be going is probably in about 18 months out as we start to look at some major infrastructure renovation. Those specific procurements will be more along the infrastructure as a service model to start to look at replacing a lot of the infrastructure that we currently have in place.
And that's obviously a little bit more of a commercial view of things,
Yes,
and it just makes sense to do it that way when things depreciate and move in through a cycle.
We got
Your
that,
CFO
and
looks
we
at
need
it.
to finish some application modernization efforts first, so they're portable to put out into those kind of environments.
Great. Stefan?
Well, actually, NOAA's really all in with cloud. So we're looking at every opportunity we can possibly get. We're really looking forward to leveraging FedRAMP very heavily because that's just a phenomenal opportunity, that along with the GSA contracting. We really are looking at some records management, help for records management. We're not sure if we're going to do it internally or externally. We'd definitely like to have a cloud solution if possible. GIS, we're looking at as software as a service and also infrastructure as a service, maybe a combination of the two. We're looking at possibly voice over IP or voice in the cloud as a possible option long term. Of course, web hosting is a big one for us, and we're looking at that as well. So we're all over the place for cloud, and wherever we have an opportunity, we're going to totally maximize that capability.
Great.
Yeah, I would say we're still going to be mixed. You know, to be honest with you, I mean, we run I have a supercomputing facility on my centers. I doubt it will become cloud, but the inroads that we have made thus far is for them to begin to think about how cloud fits into that picture. And so I think what you're going to see NASA do is continue to look at the GSA vehicles. I think we must do that. FedRAMP has to be a major player in that. I think the last thing is then thinking about, you know, we need some kind of decision mechanism that then drives the user, or because I really want to get to the business owners. So outside of CIO, convince the business owners to begin to think about how does cloud fit into your long-term architecture. And so I think we've got to make sure that we have some early successes. So we're sort of demonstrating with actually our core business, small demonstration sort of projects, and then actually documenting that, doing that in collaboration where they're actually leading the project. So when I say the data storage cloud or storage as a service, actually my scientists are leading that discussion. When I say virtual desktop infrastructure, my engineers are leading that discussion because they really would want a virtualized desktop that they could get to all the engineering applications that they want to actually real time do what they need to do away from the desktop. And so I think there are going to be opportunities where there's a mix of those capabilities, and a mix between public and private. And again, I think, you know, if I were king for a day, it would be the agility to jump between and among those environments very agilely. I need to stand up something here. It actually warrants a public cloud. I can get it. Same user says I need to take this data set or this computing job and move it into private. I can also do that through sort of a cloud broker, or what I'm trying to get to is almost a service broker across the board, right, to include cloud. So I think those are things that we've got to take into account.
And almost on an as-needed basis. I mean, there's things like collaboration that don't need to be on 365 days a year
Yes.
for certain missions or operations. So I think we're seeing more and more of a demand for, as we need things, we only want to pay for it when we need it, and we only want to use it when we need it. Turn it off when we're not. And that's more and more accessible as well from the vendor community. Lorraine, some quick thoughts on your procurement horizon.
Sure. We currently have an RFI on the street for mobile device management, and so that's again an area. We've got a bunch of pilot projects that are running on Androids and iPads, real popular with veterans, real popular with the users, and so we're really looking at how to sort of get into that app store environment. I mean, we will have a VA app store. I don't need to run the VA app store. I just need to be able to, have the policy in place to decide, what goes there and how we use it. Still struggling with some of the security and data challenges behind that. It's like one of the examples is one of the psychiatrists, they get offended if you call them online.
It's like
she's fine,
optometrist.
it's okay. It's interesting, again, just because of the customer base that we're serving, just sort of looking at, how do we take advantage of what's already out there in the community? How do we use social media? She runs group therapy twice a week. She also is the sponsor of one of our major transformation initiatives. Sometimes she's late to group. The people in group are saying, well, we'll follow you on Twitter. Just tweet and tell us, if the room changes, if you're running late, so we know. Are we really thinking enough about what's already out there? And it's her schedule. We're not divulging anybody's health information or personal information. It's already a healthcare provider we know about. So, we all like to overcomplicate things a little bit. So, when you see these RFIs go out, or you see, where we're trying to be innovative, don't leave out the stuff that's already out there that's pretty simple. And so, again, that's a big one for us. We're also looking for PBX replacements were mentioned. We've got some real scary looking equipment in the basement of some of these hospitals. I'm not sure why VA needs to be experts in the telephone business. That's kind of, VoIP isn't a fad anymore. So, that was mentioned earlier. Also wireless installations. With everybody wanting to tweet and download mobile apps and play Angry Birds while they're waiting and so on and so forth. Just in terms of, in our hospitals, patient satisfaction. If you're laid up, you want to check your email and get on Facebook and do all that stuff. Why do we have to host our own wireless infrastructure? How do we buy into that? And then again, we've got the same needs as everybody else around email and archive and discovery, storage, backup encryption. We've all got the same set of federal regulations laid upon us in terms of, how we archive, what the FOIA requirements are and everything else. So, they're by definition a common use case. So, we're pulling the thread on that as we look at how we're going to expand that capability. Trying to think of, I know we have a bunch of them. In terms of my shop, it's sort of a hybrid. We're working on our cloud first policy internally. So it's real simple for us for things like when the new GI Bill passed. It was billed a brand new benefit. There were no existing business rules around how to deliver that benefit. So that was okay, let's build a greenfield, brand new system, hosted in the cloud. It was kind of its own thing. A lot of our other opportunities aren't quite that clean, but we're looking again where we can break off pieces. Open source is an important piece of that. So as we look at, bringing in a replacement scheduling package, looking at how we integrate with a commercial laboratory package or a commercial pharmacy package or commercial case management system or whatever. All of those, when we put out the RFIs or even the RFPs, we're not opposed to a cloud solution. We got the same budget challenges as everyone else. So to the extent that, you can do it affordably, we're willing to listen.
And once again, we're hearing ecosystem. So whether it's a pre-solicitation where you're actually seeking input from industry and service providers, help identify solving the challenges. How are you going to do it? How are you going to do it with other vendors, other partners, and other programs within VA or Homeland Security or the other agencies that are looking for it? We want to stay sensitive to time. We realize that the networking and happy hour and the food is up next. So maybe we'll save the ROI metrics for the next conversation that we do getting together. I'd also like to point out that Ken and the team at SIIA announced the Public Sector Innovations Group this morning. That's a way that I think the association is looking to bridge the gap between not only the decision makers and the folks that are, the rubber hitting the road at the agencies, but also the industry, and get the two together kind of from an advisory perspective on challenge solution. And building on the NIST programs, on the reference architecture, and the use case scenarios, and now with FedRAMP as a guideline for agencies and vendors and industry, I think that's a good addition to the equation. So we ask you to get involved with SIIA actively and directly, and let's go solve some problems together and have a little happy hour.
Sounds good.
Hey, sorry for being late.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you to the panel, and thank you to our sponsors, our attendees, all of our speakers today. As Mike mentioned, we are having a little happy hour outside. Our sponsors are sticking around. Some of these
I'm
guys
not
will
going
stick
anywhere. I'm
around. I
just gonna
encourage
talk
you to chat with them all. And if you're interested in the Public Sector Innovation Group, leave your card at the front desk, or
How are
feel
you?
free to let me know.
Hey,
Thank
buddy.
you.
How you doing?
How you doing? You good?
Yeah, man, I'm good.
All right,
We got to
we
talk
all
on
need
this
to
other
get
thing.
together. Yeah.
Let me give business